I'm really quite excited to see Ryan Gosling heading up the leading actor category, not just because I fancy him, but because I think he's really excellent in La La Land and is really drawing the crowds in and deserves to be there 100%.
You're not the only girl in Britain or the world to be in.
I mean,
people fall in love with Ryan Gosling. The problem with Ryan Gosling in this category as lead actor is that he's so nonchalant. It's such an easy performance that you forget he's actually acting or dancing. This is not something he's just kind of woke up one morning and said, I'm going to be in a musical. He was a Mouseketeer alongside Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. This guy could have been a pop star. So playing a musician is not kind of out of his kind of purview. I think he does it beautifully. I think he does it brilliantly. I think does he do anything that you never thought he'd do before? He does it in Blue Valentine very well.
He smiles a couple of times, which he hasn't done for a while.
It's been a while since we've seen him smile. I think he's great. I think he's a movie star. I think this is a great way to come back from the slight sort of hammering he took for his directorial debut. Has he got the chops to tap his way all the way to the award? I'm not quite sure.
Danny?
He's undisputably and undoubtedly the best Ryan Gosling in the field. I mean, and that's what he does. I mean,
It's fine by me.
I'm not sure if that's the same as being best actor.
Yeah, I mean, Cary Grant sort of had the same problem. He was always Cary Grant, smooth, beautiful, wonderful, great, handsome, everyone loved him. Were there bits that ever stretched him? And I think that might be the problem with Ryan Gosling. Love him in it, though, I do.
Although I suppose that's a bit of a tricky one because you're saying that, he is singing and he is dancing, which for most people is a stretch, and he learnt to play the piano, and that's still not enough for you guys.
We can all sing and dance.
Dancing.
Casey Affleck, then, in a very, very different role. This is a tough role for him.
It's a very tough role for anyone. I mean, emotionally, the depths that you're having to plumb are pretty intense. It sounds challenging and potentially rewarding as an actor to play on paper a character who's very withdrawn and very silent, and when they're speaking at all, they're speaking monosyllabically. To actually do that on screen and still hold the audience's attention, then that's an achievement. I mean, my issue, such as it is with Casey Affleck in this movie, is my issue with Manchester by the Sea. It's very carefully, expertly crafted as an awardsy kind of film, and it's an awardsy kind of role. He takes us to places that few actors could take us to, and so he will be rewarded if he wins rightly for that. But it's all a little bit. It just feels a little bit predestined.
He sort of took over this role from Matt Damon, who was originally supposed to do it, and Matt Damon has much more, I think, on-screen charisma than Casey Affleck does, and I think actually if Matt Damon had done it, that would have been to the film's detriment, because that lack of charisma is almost why we're hooked by this guy. You're thinking, well, why do I want to care about him?
It appears like a lack of charisma. If it was a real lack of charisma, our minds would wander off, whereas in fact, actually, you're completely gripped by
drawn to him.
But to make it look like you've got, you're just a janitor.
Look, I think it's the one that's the winner. I think it's the thing that people think, oh, there's acting for you. That's what modern acting is.
I think if you'd had a bigger actor in this role, I think we'd have been just concentrating on whoever that actor was. I think Casey Affleck is unknown enough that we were just totally engaged by him as Casey Affleck. Andrew Garfield.
Andrew Garfield has been in two very interesting, very different, but somehow linked movies this year. Actually, Hacksaw Ridge and also Martin Scorsese's Silence,
which has been completely overlooked, hasn't it?
I think he's great in Silence. I'm glad that he's been nominated. He plays the role in Hacksaw Ridge that, again, I mean, it seems kind of slightly counterintuitive to have him in this battlefield drama, but actually he's smart casting because he does still have that innocence and that kind of that callousness to him. And also there is a core of steel, and you can see that in him, and you can see that in the characters who are these very different kinds of ways, very faith-driven, and who are very belligerent, actually, in the best sense of the word. They're belligerent characters. And so I think difficult roles, and I think he inhabits them.
I'm not a fan of Hacksaw Ridge. I'm not a fan of Silence either.
Are you a fan of Andrew Garfield?
I didn't really know either way, really. I think he's often kind of overshadowed by what's going on around him. He's a very quiet performer. And I think we're yet to see the best of him. I thought Hacksaw Ridge was one of those movies that tried to have its cake and eat it. It was an ordeal for me to watch, as was Silence. I never felt that they found the beating heart of themselves in the performances of Andrew Garfield. So for me, I'm almost shocked to see him nominated for Best Actor in this.
Do you think it is just because he's been in two incredibly big movies?
I think it's a pretty weak category this year, if I'm to say. It's the least interesting leading actor category for many, many years, and I think it's Casey Affleck's to lose. I don't really see why Viggo Mortensen's in there, for example.
Ooh, should we come to Viggo Mortensen next then?
Why don't we? Captain Fantastic, which is the movie that he's nominated for, it's an interesting, original kind of movie, and Viggo Mortensen carries the whole thing on his back. I mean, he is there on a practical level. He's in almost every scene. He's an increasingly nuanced, deceptive kind of character who actually, at moments, at key moments of the film, you think, well, actually, maybe this guy isn't the guy I'm supposed to be rooting for at all. Maybe this guy's kind of a monster, or maybe kind of an idiot. Again, that's very tricky stuff to play, and Viggo Mortensen has rightly attracted all kinds of acclaim for these very sort of splashy roles that he's played in the past. Everything's come off emotionally, physically, it's all been there on screen. But actually, it's more than that, and I think Viggo, what he does is he literally brought elements of himself and his own life onto set. So the library of the character is stocked with Viggo Mortensen's books. I think that's difficult to pull that off, to actually play someone who is in some ways a version of yourself. I like Captain Fantastic. Some people had huge issues with it. I thought it was kind of brave in quite an unusual way, and I think it was a brave performance.
I can kind of understand what you mean, Jason, though, because it feels like Captain Fantastic hasn't really been spoken about in any other category, and so it almost is like they were scrabbling around for someone to fill this gap.
It feels like a vanity project to me. Here's my library, look at my poetry, here's me sitting under a waterfall. He's literally scouted the northwest of America to find a waterfall under which he could sit poetically on his great kind of peripatetic journey through the soul of the earth.
Play the good father who then actually ends up having to themselves conclude that maybe I'm actually a terrible father after all. You know, it's interesting.
It's not too bad. And then Jake Gyllenhaal, who kind of another father who you feel is perhaps more passive than the audience would like.
It was one, if you put yourself in his position, what would you do? You know, how would you protect your wife and your child?
My problem with Nocturnal Animals full stop is that all the actors and everything just gets kind of submerged in Tom Ford's design, and everyone is just these flesh puppets, meat puppets, you know. And Jake Gyllenhaal, I mean, who is clearly a very fine and robust actor. More than anyone, he sort of disappears into the movie, and you think, well, actually, this is kind of interchangeable. You are playing, maybe deliberately, the male lead. There's nothing Gyllenhaal-ish about it.
Towards the end, there is a moment where you think that he's going to be on screen and he isn't, and actually, you kind of remember that scene for his absence.
That's kind of telling.
And I think that kind of says it all, doesn't it? So who do you think? So you think that Casey Affleck's going to win?
Yes, I do.
The safest of bets.
So join us on the 12th of February to find out who the winners are.